This is Willpower.
Today, we're sharing an exciting episode, and this one's a little different because Kristin's going to be in the hot seat. You see, she recently shared a wonderful conversation with dear friend David Stewart. David is the founder of Ageist and hosts the SuperAge podcast. As you can probably guess, he set out to understand how we can all live our best lives and approaches his conversations from a fairly holistic view. So this kind of led to some really interesting thread lines throughout the conversation as David was able to probe Kristin on a range of topics. Some of these topics include, overcoming fear and stepping outside your comfort zone. And of course, how biohacking can allow us to do that. I'm a part of Kristin's production team. I listened to all of her podcasts, including her guest appearances, and I thought that this one was just too good not to share on her own podcast. So I had her repurpose this and share it on the feed. So that's enough for me. Let's hear from David and Kristin.
Welcome to the Willpower Podcast. I'm your host, Kristin Weitzel. Together, we explore health optimization tools that propel you from comfort to courage, illuminating the path together to a remarkable life through breath, cold, and biohacking.
Hey, Kristin, how are you today?
I am wonderful and so happy to be here with you.
It's great to have you. As we were talking offline, I found you because you're part of the Brain Tap biohacky package, and your 3 meditations are like my favorites. I feel like I know you because I listen to you like a couple times a week, which is weird. I don't know.
Not weird. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Really great.
It's amazing. People sometimes ask me if I listen to myself, and I'm like, I'm not quite there yet. So, but yeah, people will tag me and once in a while when they feel like, hey, I really want to shout you out because I had a rough day today and I got some breathwork and meditation in. And yeah, it makes me feel like my work is creating value for people, which is why I'm here.
There's a few things I want to hit on here. Help me if I'm wrong here, but I see a lot of your work when you work with people, especially women, this idea of one's capability versus the fear that this sort of holds one back. I think this is not entirely gender specific either. I think men just have sort of different silly fears. I'm one of them, I can say that. So talk to me a little bit about the two poles of capability that we have and fear that maybe we don't want to go there.
Yeah. I mean, the fear piece, they're really story, right? One of my biohacking besties will always say, hey, let's walk through the valley of death. Let's not build a condo there. And people get caught up in their story in some spaces, in some ways. And I think a lot of times this is the thing we see with sort of procrastination or nervousness. We're doing a lot of limbic looping in the brain about making the story worse than it actually is. Really, there is a piece and component of life that feels like leap in the net will appear. How do I choose something? And even if it's not the thing I want, but it comes to me, and that doesn't mean like, hey, I guess I'll just suck it up and deal with this, embrace this suck. It's like, how do I say, okay, this breakup in my life just happened and I don't want it. And I'm going to choose it. I'm going to joyfully put myself in front of it so that I can experience what the exploration is here so that I can grow because it's happening for me. And all of that can sound a bit like cerebral and perhaps, easier said than done, which it is. But I think when you have the right tools to embrace the fear, to unwind your story, and you start to unpack and maybe self-actualize exactly where you are in space and time, if those things exist, then we get an opportunity to sort of release some of that, right? And I talk about capacity on the other side of this a lot. 90% of people I meet are selling themselves short. And I don't like those statistics. I don't know about you. I do have a lot of women in my audience and women I work with. And then with Sherpa Breath and Cold, I'm doing performance training in sports and athletes. And it's across the board, every shape, size, color, gender, fluidity, like everyone. I'm so happy to work in these healing modalities with everyone. I see it with so many people that as they start to layer in the right tools, as they begin to surprise themselves by having a fierce commitment to consistency with those tools, then the fear starts to trickle away and the capacity begins to grow. It's almost like this, holy shit, I can do hard things. I had no idea how amazing or how much expansion I had or how much strength I had to be able to get through this thing. This is like when you go to a restaurant and it's really bad, you write a review. you write a review and you say that was awful, but it's not as often that we have a wonderful experience and we write a review. And I think fear is the same thing. Like it capitalizes on itself, right? We have a scary thing or a bad micro trauma in our life. It repeats on itself. It's in our cells. And we're like, oh, I'm going to write the review for that. My brain's going to remember that because I was out of safety. And so that to me is really like where we need to navigate more is like, how do we unpack the places and times in our lives we felt unsafe so that we can unpack fear so we can live into the fullest capacity of how amazing we are.
Yeah, it's that negativity bias, which, served us well as cave people, but a lot less well now. A lot of your work is very physical. Talk to me a little bit about overcoming discomfort as a way of changing this story that you speak about, like our self-story, and increasing what we believe our capacity is through physicality. Yeah,
that's an awesome question. It brings things to mind like, sprinting. Sprinting is a perfect example of something where we're creating a deliberate, very short-term stressor to be able to adapt and get better at a cellular level, and maybe perhaps even at a physical level if we want to be a better marathoner, a better racer, a better recomposition our body, etc. But you'll surely much more often see someone doing like a 5K jog than you will sprinting out in the streets. Like during quarantine, I was like out in front of my neighbors' houses. I'm sure they thought I was crazy, but I was like, there's nowhere else to sprint. I'm just going to sprint in the streets. Talk about the biohacking world, movement and mobility. It's being talked about a little more, and strength training and all of those things. That's one of the things that's sort of spoken about the least, which is always so interesting to me because it is like the lifeblood of everything that we do. Our body, it's like an object in motion stays in motion. We want to age gracefully. Let's move. So I use things like, I'm a big believer. Stacey Sims, who's just a winning-some female researcher and performance athlete, talks a lot about lift heavy shit. Hey, ladies, lift heavy shit because you're not enough, right? And that holds true for men and women. We have a little bit of I think we're more risk averse just genetically. And so we're like, hey, 5-pound dumbbell looks good. It's like, no, that's not the thing. So things like sprinting, things like getting in a cold ice bath, things like lifting some heavy weights in a way that, of course, we want to have biomechanical form. And we want to I'm not just going to walk up to a squat rack and put 200 pounds on and get under it. Like Darwin, let's be smart. Yeah, those things are so critical because this is, again, all of these are stress adaptations to stressors that we are providing to our bodies so we can increase our capacity. And mobility to me feels like it's the low-hanging fruit. Breath is the same way, low-hanging fruit for adaptation, to be a better human, to feel better, and to live longer, happier, healthier.
I'm totally on board with that. I think fitness in all of its forms is just so essential, and that everybody needs to resistance train. If you're not resistance training, you're losing muscle. That's just how it is. So you have a phrase, the comfort zone is killing you. Mm-hmm. And to me, I've seen that a lot of the things that probably you and I do are not considered sort of mainstream socially acceptable. Whereas starting the day with a donut or something is fine. So talk to me a little bit about this sort of way that, I think especially as we get a little older, this idea that comfort needs to be sort of the primary driver when actually maybe not so much.
Yeah, even neurochemically, right? We talk about, you listen to our Lord Huberman is what I refer to Andrew Huberman now as our Lord Huberman because, I'm in a space where everyone's like, I don't know if you heard, but Huberman said this. So it has to be true. And it's the only thing.
Oh, God.
I love his work. I'm so thankful for it. And also, yeah, there's bioindividuality, and it's beautiful in some ways how he's revered. And I just also think it's fun. But, he'll talk about neuroplasticity and we know in the biohacking sphere and the health and wellness sphere, we know it's like, what's the best thing? I think Ben Greenfield even just talked about this on some social post I saw. It's like, what's one of the best things you can do as an aging adult? Pick up an instrument, a new instrument, try a language, do something that's going to stretch you in a way and maybe purposefully, right? In a sense, it's probably I'm not going to learn Chinese if I'm going to go travel around Mexico for a month, right? I'm going to learn a new language for a purpose, for context, because you need to have the driver. The real reason to do it is not like, I want to have more neuroplasticity and better aging brain. But trying these things out and trying them on for size, I think we discover that there's so many more things we can like in the world or love or enjoy that we didn't know about. There's so much benefit to our brain and our neurochemistry, and really stretching ourselves past this comfort zone thing. It's like, there's different generations and different ideas and thoughts. And I've seen lots of people in different stages of their lives. But we got to get past the donut is the best breakfast moment. If that's really, still, of course, it's still around. And not saying anybody shouldn't like run off and have a donut every so often. I hate overly restricting people from things that bring them joy, because I do believe, like, I'm a gluten-free eater, right? But if I go and someone's nana is like, it's not a celiac, it's not an allergy. So if someone's nana is like sweating into a sauce and making a big pasta dish and whatever, and serving it to me, I want to have the joy of sharing that with her, all the love that went into it, all the neurochemical, bliss chemicals that come up from sharing a meal in community. So it's like, how do we find the things that are going to stretch us? The comfort zone, your comfort zone is killing you, is legitimately what's happening to us over time. We are just getting so much more comfortable and so much more sedentary that it is killing us. And where can we find areas in our life that we're willing to kind of stretch and choose it as an adventure? Dan Garner is a mentor of mine, and he talks about some research. And he's like, look, this is an unpopular opinion, but here's the reality. People come to me all the time. I had a 33-year-old woman come to me last week and say, I guess it's all downhill from here. And I was like, you are not allowed to say that. Like, why do you think that? But the reality is, we have the ability to age gracefully and be mobile and do all these things. And it just feels like stretching ourselves past our comfort zone is the way for us to expand and for us to live longer.
I just want to touch on Huberman for a second, that I think that I have some trouble with some of the things that he says. And I run it by my science board and they're like, I don't know about that. I mean, I'm often wrong. I often say things that people disagree with. And I think pick your guru carefully. What I love about him is the branding, the science branding. He's like, well, yeah, that's nice.
But the science is always changing. This is what's cool, right?
Exactly.
But what's really interesting is I just listened to the podcast with Rick Rubin and Jack Cruz and Huberman, and he's pretty humble, solid man. And yeah. I have had some interaction with him, but I also think the science is always changing. And that's what's so cool, is like there's the biohackers. The one prime example I have is all the biohackers since the dawn of time, since I've known, were like, oh, your skin, it has photoreceptors, just like your eyes and your this, and like stand in the light. And a lot of that conversation was based on this research that was done on the back of the kneecaps of a bunch of people 20 years ago and was debunked relatively soon thereafter. And then it was like, okay, that's not a real thing. And then Huberman does a big piece in one of his podcasts saying I wrote a post on it because I remember there's no extraocular photoreceptivity, extraocular, meaning anything outside of your eyes, there is no photoreceptivity in the body. And then he's on this podcast with Jack Cruz, who's speaking about how he has spent 18 months digging up that we actually can emit light internally. You want to hear more, you can go to that podcast. But it's interesting. There is lots of science to like layer in there and unpack. And Huberman's like has already corrected what he thinks is corrected. And now he's in another space where it's like, oh, actually there is extraocular capacity on the skin to be able to transmit light for other reasons, right? Or et cetera, et cetera. So the science is always changing. We're always learning. And it's a big question of like, how long are we going to listen and who wants to do that deep work? But what is cool about him is that he's willing to do the work of diving into all of that. Because if you've read research papers, they're not my jam. They're not like my biggest joy in the world. I'm so happy to have him be into that.
Yeah. All this stuff is really dynamic. And I think that's one of the things that people find quite frustrating, because like we all know gravity doesn't change. We know, like, if you drop a ball, we know how fast it's going to go and when it's going to hit the ground. When you get into biology, especially human biology, it's not like that. This stuff changes all the time. So I want to sort of touch on this idea of, you get back to the comfort zone idea, and a lot of what is, I'm just going to say, socially acceptable as being comfortable is actually pretty self-destructive, and how that it's not self-affirming at all. It's considered okay. And I remember my mom in the 60s used to smoke with the windows rolled up in the car with us kids, wouldn't wear a seatbelt because it wrinkled her dress. And it was totally normal for people to have like a couple of martinis at lunch. Yeah. That was okay. So thankfully, that stuff's all no-go now. I feel like the bar has sort of been lowered in a lot of ways, that things are acceptable when maybe they shouldn't be. Maybe there's a short term you might feel better, but in the long term, like, you're hurting yourself.
I just saw someone, so funny you said that. I just rolled past a red light in LA. I just got back from LA yesterday. And there was someone in their car, windows rolled up, smoking a cig. And I was like, I drove by and literally said out loud, are we really still doing that? So those things are out there. You know, I worked in the alcohol and spirits industry, consumer packaged goods early on in a corporate career that I left. I loved it. It was interesting. It was fun. It was wonderful to see what companies were actually making alcohol, even though it's not the healthiest thing, in a sustainable or in at least a integrous way, and what companies were just throwing stuff in bottles for people to drink. It's interesting how the world of the marketing arm, and I launched Red Bull in the United States with a great team of people, and how that was like first functional beverage that was considered sort of healthy at that point, right? And now we might have different opinions, but just learning and understanding the consumer landscape and psyche and how people adopted brands and adopted what they put in their life gave me a different vantage point than the typical biohacker. And I don't want to poo alcohol. And even as I like sit there with a bottle of like sustainable biodynamic Gamay on my shelf, I don't drink a lot anymore. Perhaps because I had plenty of alcohol in the days I worked in that industry, but perhaps it just doesn't feel good in my body. I will have the occasional glass of wine. I'm always making sure it's like from dry farms or it's biodynamic, et cetera. And that's beautiful. Once in a while around the holidays, I'll have like a really well-crafted cocktail that's just like a decadent moment. But I think there's still the drinking thing exists. I'm talking to people who maybe are doing that to be able to quell some stressors or get sleep at night and not realizing that the long-term effects of that aren't great. I think another thing, whether it's like cool to bring up or not, I think the other thing that's happening is there's some shows unpacking this for men, and I'm not sure it's as prevalent for women. It's out there. The masturbation thing is a thing. This self-satisfaction, I can get anything delivered via the internet, via Amazon, via anything, anytime I want, to be able to create some level of satisfaction that is like removing us from having deep connection with each other. And there are things out there that are like, you know, they're the quick fix. And America is well known for that. The quick fix of, various products or supersizing things. And there is something about the patience of, I don't know if you're a Dune fan, but there's a word in Dune, David, that's called spanisbogen. They like use it in the early Dune film or book or something. And it's really about the joy of the waiting. It's really like the joy of the journey, but the beauty in sort of waiting to get something actually makes it that much sweeter. And so that's a lot of the stuff that I think we put down when we're like hitting on our dopamine iPhones and all that. Yeah, I'd love to be able to see that change. And some of what I'm hoping I'm doing with the breathwork and cold exposure space specifically, and some of the female biohacking, of course, my one-on-one clients and group programs and all of that, is hopefully unpacking that a bit so we can find ways to be in community and share that, hey, this is a long-term goal. Let's bolster it with some short-term goals together, and let's celebrate. Don't celebrate ourselves enough when we have small wins.
Our plates are full. People are stressed to the max. Really, I'm feeling it. Are you feeling that lately? A lot of hormonal imbalance, a lot of conversation about my hormones are out of whack, they're imbalanced, I'm not sleeping well, I'm stressed out. And I did a solo episode on this mineral that is so, so important. It is game-changing to help you feel your best, and that's magnesium. So you can go listen to that solo-sode. And the reality is magnesium is an absolute must for keeping your hormones balanced and your body functioning optimally. Most of us are not getting enough of it from our diets alone. And that's why I'm here to remind you, yes, you need to take a supplement. And yes, the one that I take is Bioptimizer's Magnesium Breakthrough. And it is by far the best. I've been using it personally for 6 years. I use it with all of my clients. It is so, so important because it has 7 different types of magnesium, the best ones, all in one capsule. Now, I'm taking 2 at night before I go to sleep because I got a little extra stress going on. But when you manage your sleep, your digestive health, and your stress, your hormones can rebalance. So I want you to support your system by using Magnesium Breakthrough by Bioptimizers. Bioptimizers.com, BIOPTIMIZERS.com/wellpower, or you can use the code WellPower10 to save a little money, to support this podcast, and mostly to support your hormone balance, your sleep, and your stress. Bioptimizers.com. Check it out.
Let's talk about some of the male-female differences out there. I mean, I've read that fasting for women is different for men in that there's a cortisol response. Are you seeing, so I know that you do a lot of voluntary cold exposure.
Yeah.
Putting people into ice baths. Are there differences there? Are there gender differences in the physiology with that?
The answer is yes. The short answer is yes. Women are different than men neurochemically. My friend Kayla is a a neurobiologist, does similar sort of research to what Andrew Huberman does, but does it really in the landscape of women in the research, women's health. We still don't have enough research on the female physiology, believe it or not. It's not expanding enough or quickly enough. It is better, but it's not much better, truth be told. We still have a lot to learn, but there are differences in our neurochemistry, genetically, and obviously, our sex, as the sex we're born in, makes us different. For fasting, Mindy Pelz is a great resource. I love her work. She has a book called Fast Like a Girl. I've interviewed her on my podcast, and really, I've interviewed Dave Asprey on my podcast talking about this. I tend to be a bit more conservative on fasting for women. Now, it's potentially slightly easier and more supportive in menopausal years, but during reproductive years, especially given the way women are trying to conceive now, how much more challenging fertility can be in people's lives. I'm like, we got enough hormone imbalance as it is. How do we find a way to, if we're going to fast, conservatively fast as females? Maybe it's not every day. Maybe it's not like go hard, Jocko Willink, David Goggins, like love, going to do that. Maybe we find a way to balance our power with our sensitivity as women. And we actually say, okay, cool. Every other day I'm going to do a fast, or I'm not going to do like a 12 hours or 15 hours. I'm going to do shorter fasts. And I actually prefer I think you want to do a longer fast that's like 24, 36 hours, something like that for longevity. Great. Do that once a quarter and then build fasting in a way that supports you. But many, many women are doing the thing where they don't eat till 1:00. And it's just like leptin, ghrelin, cortisol, all of these hormones are like, what? I'm not sure what's going on. And absolutist thinking isn't going to get us anywhere. I'm not on the podcast to say, hey, women, don't fast. It's never like that. We're all bio-individual. And that's what makes this conversation so beautiful and also so challenging, is somebody listening to this could be an optimal candidate to try a little fasting for a while. But my short-ish answer to females is I'm more conservative. I think you should be more conservative, especially if you are in your reproductive years and you have any kind of hormonal imbalance. It's kind of where I sit. And then Mindy talks a lot about the best time for women to fast actually is when they get their period, because it's sort of the low hormone phase. And the low hormone phase is we're a bit more normalized. We're not going to fluctuate so much. And so we actually have less hunger signaling going on in the body. Whereas like the days leading up to our period, I'm always like snacking and salt and chocolate. And, I have other cravings that are coming up. So really finding the right times in the cycle to be able to fast also can make all the difference. And similarly, there's other things in the landscape of women's health that we can adjust.
Talk to me about the cold and male-female differences.
Yeah. So we find, pun intended, about research with cold. Can you imagine this just for a moment, that some of the research is like my left arm in a cold tub of ice that is X number of degrees. A lot of the research is above 50 degrees. Some of it is men, some is women, some is whole body, some is a minimal amount is cryo, some of it is immersion, some of it is pre-training, post-training. It's all over the map when it comes to time and temperature and body parts or full immersion. And what we do see, just anecdotally and in some of the research, is that it tends to be that the male hormone cycle is a bit more of a 24-hour clock, and men tend to do better and are pretty okay with I'm just going to plunge every day. Just cold exposure every day, all the things, beautiful. Again, that's a generalization. Surely there are men out there who have some predisposition or some dis-ease state. That's not a great idea. And for women, I'm a little bit more conservative. I have the females I work with not plunging every day. Now, I did a 30-day ice plunge challenge in the beginning of this year. And people were like, oh my God, Kristin, you're doing 30 days of cold. And I'm like, hey, listen, some days I'm doing cold showers, definitely not as high of a stressor as a cold tub, full immersion. So, and I'm doing cold every day. And you know what? It's 30 days in a row and it's with the community and it's beautiful. And I'm stoked about it. Am I going to do it 365 days a year? No. So when I have access and availability, sure, I might be up at an ice hole in Canada in the most beautiful landscape with stars at night. And I can get in that ice hole twice a day, every day for 3 days. Cool. I'm going to do it because I love it, because it changes me as a person. And also, I'm not going to beat it up. Definitely that. And also women will come all the time and say, oh, I have my period. I can't get in the cold today. And my question is always, well, I respect consent and their boundaries. And if they're a hard no, that's fine. I always ask the question, is it the chicken and the brat on your shoulder, or is it really the period thing? Or what's that about, right? If it's a cultural thing, okay. But there really isn't any research to say there's a bad time of the cycle. I will say that the few days leading up to our period, we are like have a lower pain threshold. We're way more sensitive, emotional, physical to stress in general. Sometimes our sleep suffers more during that part of the cycle. So maybe I'm not going to like power through 5 days of ice baths as a female leading up to my period. Again, sometimes we feel heightened emotional states. Maybe some women have PMS. And there is something to be said for 2 minutes of cold water immersion during that time to like reset your nervous system, have a good cry after, any of those things. And so there's no perfect answer, but there are definitely watch outs. For all the women or any women or females that are listening to this right now, I really encourage you to really dive into like what the thing is that is your intuition, because that helps drive us, right? And I don't mean I had an intuitive hit that I had to go eat the whole pizza, because that's probably like a food craving. Or like, food, you're soothing yourself, self-soothing tactic. Because women will say that to me. I just felt like I'd had the intuitive hit. I just needed to do like ice cream and pizza last night. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, what are you going to do? Let's start again today. But yeah, so ice baths, I think intuition is important. And also do the hard thing. I put so many bodies in the cold, David, so many bodies of so many different kinds. And I see the thing that I want to say about cold exposure and ice baths and cold plunging and whatever we want to call it, I call it intentional cold exposure, not just because it is ice as abbreviation, but because we have an intention we can set or a context, which to me is the missing link in cold that no one talks about. What is your context? Like, what are your goals? It's always going to be a different protocol. But the thing for me is like, how do we decide we're going to take the leap and do something challenging? And build it into our repertoire and know that we have that capacity. Because what I get to see with someone in 3 minutes in an ice bath, I get to see the microcosm of how they respond to stress and how they behave in the world for their entire lives. And that could sound like super woo to you, but that's really what you see. It's amazing to be able to do that work.
Our travel writer lives on the North Fork of Long Island at the end, and she swims in the North Atlantic 365. And so that water, she describes it as it becomes gelatinous at about 30 degrees.
Yeah.
In order to do that, and she's out for like 20 minutes. It's not 3.
Yeah.
But she's used to it.
Swimming. She's cold water swimming. It's like you have to adapt to be able to do that. Your body, like dizzy fluctuations. Like, let's be clear, you can drown. Yeah. It's like not that anyone should be just doing that like willy-nilly. Hey, let me start tomorrow. Put down the donut and go to the 20-minute swimming. But it's also awesome, right? It's like a skill that she's learned and adapted to.
When I live in Park City most of the time, and in the winter, the pool, one of the pools at the gym I go to freezes. And so what we learned was if you start going in about October, by, end of November, it's ice on top and you break the ice and you go in. I think I've managed that for, I don't know how cold that water is. It's somewhere around freezing. And I can do, I'll do about a minute, and it just becomes like too painful on my hands and my feet. It's like, I gotta get out of here. My favorite is the circulating cold tub at about 40. Mm-hmm. So that I'm good. Again, hands and feet out because they just like hurt too much. But then this sort of the initial like 20 or 30 seconds is just so unpleasant. And I just have to tell myself, like, you're not going to die. It's okay. You're not going to die. It's all right. Just sort of calm down, try and like reduce your tendency to hyperventilate here. It's going to be okay. I do it for 2 reasons. One, to tell myself that you did it. It's like, okay, you can do this really initially unpleasant thing. And then when I get out, oh my God, do I feel smart. I just feel like so on. And that's why I know, like in Park City. So it's cold there in the winter, but I can't tell you how many people have outdoor cold plunges. Like it's like a thing.
It is a thing. Well, I'm so excited that it's a thing. Every day somebody calls me. Every day someone calls me or DMs me and says, what ice bath should I buy? Every day. Or how long, or what kind of time, or what are the best ones in the market? And I'm like, this is a call. I can't just DM you 3 answers. This is a call and it's a blog and it's a whole, it's a whole thing. But I'm super thankful that it's coming back into fashion. I guess that's what we say. I don't know. It's like coming back because nobody alive on the planet, right, is the first person to be doing like breathwork or cold exposure. People have been doing this for thousands of years. And I'm so excited about it. And those first moments of the plunge or the dip or the cold bath you're doing are so important for us to like, what a beautiful body that we live in, that it goes, stop, get out, I want to save you. Like how beautiful that we have that. This is why I do this work. I don't have some preconceived notion that I've set up. I don't necessarily, or maybe, but I don't have any genetic issues. I don't have any contraindications. I don't have anything to have this be any different. But I've quite honestly never had a thing where I'm like, I get in and I'm like, this is awful, or this is painful, or I hate this. I've just never had that. It's probably why I do the work. And I talked a lot about this training I just came off of. It's like there was a younger woman who went in, maybe 21, on our volunteer day, because all the coaches get a volunteer so they get to coach someone they don't know at the end of the weekend. And she was like, I'm so excited for this. I stayed up last night a little late and I watched all these TikTok videos of all these people ice plunging to see how they were doing it and their response. And what she essentially was doing was like visualization. And she came in the next day and I was like, it's your first ice bath. How you feeling? She's like, I'm so excited. I'm all in. I watched these videos. I'm ready. And she what? She got in and she like had a beautiful time and experience. Was it hard for her? Yes. Was it challenging and, to her physiology? Of course. Did she get in and have a big smile on her face and just rock it? Like it was almost easy? Yeah. And this is like, you can watch someone who's like doing, powerlifting or going to do some CrossFit games or something. And you can see how the lift is going to go when they're 10 feet away approaching the bar. It's like the approach is everything. And it's like how when I first was training, I'm XPT certified. I trained with Laird and Gabby at their house and then took the certification for coaches. And that's Laird Hamilton and Gabby Reese. I always forget to think. I think everyone knows who they are. But they're amazing athletes. And I was like, I couldn't keep up with, that was a whole 2-day experience where I was doing my very best, but I was sort of evident that I was the weakest link. Lots of professional athlete vibes or like retired athletes at their house. And I'm like, oh, weights in the pool, 11 feet down. There's thankfully like a master scuba diver sitting on the floor of the pool for like safety. It's real deal. And, Laird is insane, like in the most beautiful way. He's like jumping off the sauna, jumping into the pool, weights. And I'm like, I'm having moments coming up from weighted workout at the bottom of 11 feet and attempting things where I'm coming up being like, thankfully we're in a pool because I got some tears in my eyes, no one can see that I'm like, I'm nervous. I'm trying to overcome fear. And so I was the weakest link. It was relatively evident. And then I knew that after lunch, we were going to be doing sauna and cold. And I had done years of cold dips at Korean spas and Russian and Turkish bathhouses in New York City as I was growing up, like teenage years, like late teenagers, early 20s of years prior. But I was going in like 30 seconds being like, well, this is amazing, and getting out and kind of not knowing what it was doing or why I was feeling how I was feeling. And then you have all that hot there. And so I just said, I'm going to go do this ice plunge. And they said like 3 minutes, and I'm just going to head dunk on the in and head dunk on the out. And I have all of these mostly males, like these big, strong men. And I was like, decided I'm going to go first. It's like the alpha energy in me. I'm going to be better than anyone else. Like, look, we all have a little competitive spirit, but I needed to prove myself for myself as well to be like, I want to be a functioning good part of this team. I was like, I'm going to do this like a Zen master. Like I'm going to go in there like it's like yoga. I'm going to use every skill, every breath, everything I have. I didn't even have to raise my hand and say, I'm going first. Mark, the instructor there, when I was gathered around the tub, I was like looking at him so intently. He's like, I think Kristin's going first. And I was like, yep. And then I went and got in a way that was so approaching the bar. I already knew how I was going to be. I visualized it. I did it. It was smooth and easy. Of course it was cold. And I got out and lots of those men were like, whoa, because now the bar has been set. And then also I'm pulling my weight in a different way. So I have some weaknesses and I have some strengths like everyone else. And so for me, that was a really pivotal moment. It was when I knew I was going to do it more, when I wanted to coach it. I chased those coaches around until they let me in their coaching program, and then on and on and on. And that's like 6 years later. So it's like, it's such a practice of power, and it's such a place that we can, and it's not to slight you to be like, oh, this hurts and this is painful. It is. Many people use those words. I try to not use those words because I'm not trying to scare off people from getting in the cold. And the reality is mostly anyone, there's a few contraindications, but mostly anyone can do anything for 3 minutes that's challenging. And if we learn how to use our breath, we can crush it. We can do it. And then we can feel what you feel, which is a parasympathetic rebound, which is I am smart, I'm heightened focus, I'm awake. My body is so thrilled that it survived. It turns all the switches on, like of all the best things we want. And so it feels so good to get out.
Yes, it does. No denying that. Gabby and Laird are they're professional athletes. And they're not only perfect. She's an Olympian. I'm used to I'm in Park City. There's like a lot of that. I love this, Kristin. Like in Park City, somebody invites you for a hike or something. You have to level set by saying, I don't have a medal. Really good chance they do in something. And you just have to say, like, I'm a normal human. I'm sort of a reasonably fit normal human, but I see these sort of people, and it's like I don't have that physiology.
Like 3 months ago, I was river swimming in Park City. It was so incredible, and I'm coming back to SLC area in Park City, where my friend is co-hosting Sherpa Breath and Cold training in November.
Right.
Get the details so you can send me all your people and come and check it out.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, you swim in the Provo River in November. That'll
get you.
Yeah, or you can come out. If you come up to Park City, go to Silver Mountain, the gym that I go to, and one of the pools isn't heated. So by November, that'll be, probably it'll be chilly. Yeah. For anyone who hasn't done this, there is an enormous difference between still cold water and circulating cold water.
For sure.
So in still cold water, like in the pool, even though it's 32 degrees, if you want to make it easier on yourself, don't move, because you build up this like layer of relative warmth around you. If you're in a circulating cold tub, or you're in the ocean or a river, it's like another thing, is all I got to say.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something beautiful about being in nature too, right?
Yeah.
That and also maybe balances out the breaking of the thermal bubble and the intensity that comes with moving water. There's something, it's like after one of the trainings, the people in my course was driving me back to the place I was staying. And he's like, hey, can you just want to take a quick dip in the river. And I was like, didn't have a bathing suit on it with me. And I'm like, yeah, I'll take some content of you. And he went down to the rocks and the river, and it's all flowing and cold. And I was like, I can't not do this. And so I was just like, Cameron, I'm just going to strip down to my undies and get in. I hope that's okay with everyone in this, because there's other people around, but it's like a bathing suit. So I just couldn't like take myself away from it, because it's like grounding and earthing and then like getting in the water. And I was like, okay, this is sort of like a moment, but it's really beautiful to do this work in nature as well. Yeah. I mean, you could tell. Can you tell? I'm like addicted to it. I really love it. I really believe in it. There are no two modalities. Like I've been biohacking for 12 plus years. I've been always on this doing wackadoodle nutrition things and exploring a lot. I've been ever curious. There are no two modalities that I've ever used. And I've had lots of fails and peptides and all the things. There are no two modalities that I've ever used that are as effective are as efficient and effective in transforming people as breath and cold exposure together. There's just no two. It's like one. Where else can you go? I'm not saying it's a silver bullet, but it's like on one dip, you can be like, whoa, okay, maybe I need to leave my job. I didn't know that I could do things like this. I feel this neurochemistry. Like talk about, all the challenges people are having with stress and depression and mental well-being right now. Oh my goodness, I can feel better again. I'm like my old self. Like all of those things come up and out. And especially if it's with a group or community or coach or someone who just makes you feel like safe, right? That's the important piece, that you can shed some of the really heavy stuff we carry around and actually shift into like a better version of yourself, and just in one, right? And then hopefully you go back for more. I really just love it. It's pretty wild.
Discovering unknown capacity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here's the skinny. We all know, and if you don't know, we talked about it with Molly McLaughlin, or Molly Easton now that she's married, on this podcast. Sleep is a skill. And in order to be able to bolster our sleep hygiene and manage our health and well-being to the best of our ability, we have to manage one thing, and that is light. How are we going to manage light? Blue blocking glasses. The marketplace is filled with a bazillion types of styles of glasses. A lot of them look really dorky, let's be honest. But I found this company, Filter Optics, and they help me, especially with the nights that I have to be on the computer or be on the phone or be out in an event in an indoor space where there's artificial blue light. These two guys in Norway crushed the style on this. There's amazing styles across a landscape of all of their glasses. You can apply your prescription to them. You can utilize them to block the artificial light, pop them on at sunset, use them when you're in front of your computer all day long, and they are sustainable and good for the planet. Let's get together on this. I know we're all talking about it and we know better. And all you got to do is get yourself a pair of Filter Optics to optimize your health and well-being, to manage your blue light, and to sleep better. It's filteroptics.com. Use the code WELLPOWER, just like this podcast. You'll save $1 or $2 and you'll support my show. Thanks so much. Filteroptics.com.
So this word biohacking, which we discussed. I have a bit of an allergy to this word. I'd like you to define biohacking for me.
Yeah. I just did this on social. People ask still all the time, and there is an aversion to the word, especially there's plenty of women that don't like it. I think it's taking ancient practices, lots of things that we are already doing. I say a lot of times to women, you're meditating, you're probably already a biohacker. But taking meditation and breath work and some of the simple ancient practices that we may have worked into our lives and combining them with innovation and technology, right? Getting on some of the machines or looking at the science and things that have been discovered and utilized for us to be able to hack or create effective shortcuts, not just like, snake oil, but effective shortcuts that we can utilize everything in between that and combine it with our intuition to say what is going to work for me and combine it with our lab work so that we can adjust the environment both inside and outside of ourselves. And when we do that, we can set ourselves up to live longer, better, to be happier. And those things are the things that are really, as an end game, the most important thing. We all should be seeking joy. I'm shoulding, but seeking joy and love and kindness, like when it comes right down to it, those are the things that are going to make the world go round and make our life succeed. And we can't take it with us. As far as we know, we can't take it with us. We get one time, at least in this meat suit, we get one time around. I don't know what I am next, but biohacking is the thing that is going to help you optimize your health so you can feel better throughout the entirety of your journey to joy.
Is Adderall biohacking?
Pharma. I'm not a big fan of pharma. And also, I am a fan of people of their own volition choosing medicine. I want to say Adderall is not biohacking. I'm not as much of a fan, but I also know people take metformin, people take prescription medication. I think contextually, it could be. It depends is like any other good answer. My preference is to stay off of pharmaceuticals just because of the side effects that exist. I do think there are some, obviously some people need it. Some people need metformin for other reasons, right? They need to be able to stabilize their body. So not my first to go to biohack. I think there's other ways to play it.
Ozempic.
Look, you got to be the right candidate for it if you're going to do it. So I'm going to digress really quickly. One time a therapist said to me, having a conversation at a social event, not my therapist, but it was like, I like when people show up to me and they have all this dysfunction, I say to them, I want to work with you, but here's my rule. If you're not meditating at least once a day, 20 minutes, I'm not working with you. Because if you don't get the baseline right, you don't get to get the cheats. And that's the problem. If we're going to say there's a problem with biohacking or that term, or it alludes to the fact that perhaps you don't have to do the basics. And I get that the basics can be simple, not easy. And I get that the basics can sometimes actually be boring. Let's find ways to shortcut that from being boring. Let's find ways to make them exciting. So Ozempic is a thing that I think, number one, I want to say this out loud, and I hope this lands for people. If you have ever had any eating dysfunction in your life, anorexia, bulimia, body dysmorphia, and that's a lot of, I will say females from my experience, but a lot of people, I'm a hard no on Ozempic. Tirzepatide is also out there as well. I think tirzepatide is a better solution than Ozempic, but we're splitting hairs. And if anyone shows up with an eating dysfunction or disorder, the answer is no. It's a twisted, cutting style. It will make the problem worse. So that's something that I have a really strong belief on. If someone is looking for the lesser of two evils in some way before they go and cut themselves open and have some kind of other surgery, stomach wise, etc., then perhaps it's something that they could try. I think you got to get the basics right first. Are you getting mobility every single day, movement? Are you eating at McDonald's and then shooting with Ozempic? No, the answer is no. This is the vertical of biohacking that I don't like, which is I'm not going to do the other stuff. I'm just going to take the pill that I think will get the answer. Now, maybe you're going to get a short-term solution. I'm also libertarian, so whatever you want to do with your body is totally fine. We need to be smarter when it comes to health and well-being. And we need to be smarter around medications that are prescribed pharmaceutically and just making money for the man. So libertarian of me to say that. But yeah, it's a hot button for me because I have a lot of eating disordered people around me in my life or have had. And I just feel like I have friends I see on social. They're like, I've never felt so good. I've never been so great. I've finally shifted the body weight I couldn't lose, all of the things. And I'm not here to say it's a Band-Aid, but in some cases it's a Band-Aid. Some other labs and things might be more helpful to figure out the head of the snake. That's what we want to find, right? What's the head of the snake?
We did a podcast about, 8 months ago or so on Ozempic. And we had a couple of people on who were very pro Ozempic. I take the other side of it. there's a lot of data on the other side of it. But I just to bring it back to like, what is biohacking and what's not, I really want another word for this. People call me a biohacker and I sort of get a little like, what do you mean by that? I'm trying to become the best version of myself as I am today. So I'm not 20 today. I owe a debt to the people who helped me along all these years. I owe a debt to my body. I owe a debt to my teachers to really try and be like the best version of David I can. Mm-hmm. And that's why I do some of these things. Like my goal in life is full self-actualization.
Yeah.
That's sort of what powers me. That's just my thing. So that's sort of how I look at these different things that people do. And there's certain things in the biohack world that I won't do. Certain things I check with my doctor and it's like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? Am I okay? And, I think both of us are in a position where we have a lot of medical science people that we can just call up and say like,
oh yeah,
hey, what happens if I do this? What do I got to look at? And that's sort of how I go about it.
Yeah. And you got to have a good life team, medical team, et cetera, right? Friends and actually paid professionals, I think, that can advise you. So then I was on Power Athletes podcast talking about red light therapy. And that's John Welburn, who's like an ex-pro NFL player. And I was like, biohacking, like, what's the thing? You don't like the word? And he's like, listen, I don't know where you've been, but the last 30 years, we've been biohacking. We've been calling it health and sports performance. We've been doing the work. We don't need to call it biohacking, some fancy fandango. Like, and he also thinks, he's like, look at the landscape of most of the people biohacking. They're like not even taking care of themselves. Who in that group can back squat? You ever listen to John? He's like strongly opinionated and also super sweet and lovely. And also just, he has a strong opinion about fitness. Like, get under the bar, try some hard stuff. Like, before you go do all the other things, and I lean in that direction. I was also just like, okay. He's like, naming names and kind of laying the playing field out. And I was like, okay, some of these are my people you're hating on right now. But yeah, it's a tough word. And for women, it's hard. It's challenging as a word for females, I think, because we are slightly more genetically predisposed to be risk averse because we make babies and have to protect them and all that. In the beginning, I remember the early days. It was like Dave with all of his products, Dave Asprey and all of his products and things and butter and coffee and Ben Greenfield with cryotherapy, where they were talking about everyone freezing to death in a cryo chamber and injecting himself with stuff. And then red light therapy on his balls. He was like, red light therapy on your testicles. Like it was a lot for the ladies, a lot for women. I'm always fascinated by that start, right? And it had, in the beginning, you go to a conference, it was like 5% or less female. It was heavily male dominated. And so I think there's some of that felt off-putting and felt a little like, woo, out there. And yeah, either risky or crazy or male energy. And I think that turned women off from the beginning. I mean, with my podcast is Well Power. And quite often I'm like, oh, it's a roadmap to all the biohacks you could ever want. And I don't mind the words so much because it's in the common vernacular and I don't think it's going away. So I just try to make it approachable. Like I want people to know there's like approachability there. It's not for the only elite. We hear this a lot too, right? It's the 2%ers or people who are wealthier. There's plenty of free biohacks if you just look for them, right? It's like I made an ebook being like, here all the free biohacks are less than $5, And so, yeah, it's unfortunate. And, we're stuck with it. And maybe we'll come up with a better word. Health optimization gets used a lot. So we'll see.
I will say, and you have much more experience with this than I do, but from what I've seen, women are like, I'm just back to the cold. Like the guys will be much more hesitant about the cold. And the women are just like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this thing. And I'm pleasantly surprised by that.
A lot of men will just get in because it's like the alpha male energy thing, or they're like, for many, many, many years, my wake up alarm was Jocko Willink being like, I'm going to give you the count of 10, get to the gym, like all this, like, and I love those guys. And I love that philosophy. Like their philosophies, I've sort of grown up in that. A lot of male mentors and a lot of that energy. And, I got attuned to it. And that's me. And I also think it didn't serve me in some ways because in the last 5 years of my life, I've really tried to lean a bit more into my divine feminine and my softness and sensitivity and things that I was leaving on the table in order to like power through everything and put myself to a level of burnout. And it's not healthy. So when I look at that landscape, I think, how do we navigate the sensitivity that we have, and how do we look at the space as women and cover for ourselves and care for ourselves and not do the go hard philosophy all the time. And so when men are getting in the ice bath, that go hard philosophy will sometimes lead them there, or it's like one-upping their friend, or God forbid their girlfriend goes in 3 minutes. This just happened. And somebody's like, I have to do 3 minutes now. She did 3 minutes. It's like, okay, that's your own story. And also the biggest thing I see with males is like, there is a component, especially with gym heads in some way, of the muscling through cold. And for me, although that can be the only thing that exists in the first plunge, but for me, the beauty of the ice bath is, how do I actually sit in the fully present moment of now and surrender to what's happening so that I can understand myself better? And I think that comes up less with, I just see it more with men, like muscling through the whole thing. And I'm like, awesome, you did 3 minutes. And you missed some of the point, like some of the most important point that the ice bath can give you, in my opinion. And also, it doesn't mean you can't go out. It doesn't have to be overly ritualistic. It doesn't mean you can't go out with friends and be like, yeah, you do 5, I'll do 4, like, or have some head dunking challenge. Like, all of that's fine as long as you're safe. And also, there's other things to glean from it. There's other parts of ourselves that we can discover if we just kind of sit in the stillness of it. You know, I want to liken it to this thing that, I don't know how many people are listening to this right now or how you are with needles, but I've never been quite good with needles. I mean, I pass out. Like, and for a biohacker, it's not great. So it's like, I'm trying all these different things all the time. It's like taking blood, and I do lab work every 3 months, and it's just, I pass out. And recently I was doing like an ozonated, an IV ozone therapy. Have you ever done that?
No.
Super lovely. I feel like a superhero for 2 days after. So they take your blood out, they mix it with ozone, and then they put it back in your body. And not all of your blood, but a portion of it, of course. And somebody said to me in the midst of it, when I was like trying to not hem and haw and be in this story about, I'm nervous with needles, right? In the same way that you might be nervous in an ice bath, which I just don't have that. And overly like focused and muscling through and gripping, like white knuckling it. Somebody said, hey, what happens if you just let it be like, it's a needle going into your arm? Let it be a needle going into your arm. Just let that be the thing that you're feeling right now. That's what's happening. That's real. It doesn't have to be overblown. It doesn't have to be something. I'm spending the whole time, right, trying to mask it. And then I was like, oh, okay, let me just like let it be the thing. So maybe I'm not going to watch it go in my arm, but let that be the thing. It's going to have a small pinprick into my skin. It's going to have a few feelings. And when I let it be the thing that it is, I was like, oh, this is crazy. What do I say to people when they get in on those first 30 seconds? I get down, I'm at eye level with them, and I'm like, hey, yes, let it be what it is right now. Let it be what it is. So it's so interesting that I'm like coaching that in one arena. It's obviously, this is the other point of the ice. We don't get in ice baths to get good at taking an ice bath. We get in ice baths to get good at life. And that's the thing, right? So it's like, I just liken it to that, right? It's like, how can we be really present with exactly what's really going on and not so much story and not the muscling through or the avoidant? How can we be like present and be like, okay, I'm choosing this and this experience is happening for me. And what can I gain from being right here, right now?
That's really well said. Thank you. I just want to close with what I've seen, especially like people my age. The women just shine and the men sort of pull back. And I've noticed with the cold and some other things, the women are just stronger. The men, we have this delusion because we can pick up heavier stuff that we're the stronger gender. Gentlemen, you are deluded. The women going to kick your butt when it counts.
There is an internal strength, but that is what you're saying is true in many. Yeah. So it's a beautiful thing to witness, right? It's like why the male energy in whatever form or shape it comes in, and the female energy in whatever shape or form. I talk a lot about male energy being the doing and female energy being the being. Mm-hmm. But it's why we need both. We need both of those things to like be in balance and to support each other in like this world's community that we hopefully are going to continue to create to thrive.
Kristin, it's been great having you on. And I love listening to your voice a couple times a week. I do your breath work and it helps me with my day, and I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, David. It's been such a pleasure to sit and speak with you and continue to learn more about all the beautiful work you put in the world. So I will be following you right back as well.
Thanks so much. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Yes, thank you for joining us here on Well Power. You can submit questions, learn more, shop incredible brands, and connect with me at wellpower.life or follow me on social at biohacking.breath.cold. From comfort to courage, friends, we're doing it. Any foul language you hear is not approved by my mother.